Okay, I've done so many video reviews on the Nikon D500, but it's exactly what so many people asked me for. I mean, just tons of people asked me to review the hell out of the Nikon D500. There's a few people recently said that they're going to hunt me down and assassinate me if I did another video on the D500, and I understand their angst on that one. Past few days have been a few people have a pissy fit. They had their maxi pads in a wad. Referring to guys, actually. They still had their maxi pads in a wad. When I was doing some test shots down in Florida, I kept the distance exactly the same. Not these shots. These are shots I just did a couple hours ago. Actually, less than a couple of hours ago. So I could have complete control of the light while it was dark. And they were complaining because they used the exact same Zeiss lens on the D750 versus the D500. And that, of course, is a different field of view. But is it really? Actually, it's technically the exact same field of view. The only difference is we have the exact same field of view from the lens, but we have a different captured field of view. That's another distinction that's actually important, too, because you can't move the tripod because then you run into issues of the inverse square of the distance as far as luminal intensity. So if I want to keep the same lens but keep the same captured field of view, and I move the tripod to keep the same captured field of view, then I run into a serious issue, because then I'm actually changing the distance from my target that I'm shooting to the front element of the exact same lens on both bodies. So that means that the test is just foobarred. So you can't do that. So I bowed to the wishes of some people, but I've already done the test, and obviously this is darker on the right side here. I did several tests with 4 different lenses. I used the 50mm f1.4 D series autofocus, and I used them both the exact same f-stop. And I know there's a difference between t-stop, which is a transmission stop, versus an f-stop. But the t-stop on both of these at their respective apertures is very similar. And also the resolving power and the color saturation is very similar. So on this particular test, I used the Nikon D50 50mm f1.4D autofocus at 12,800 ISO. Tripod did not move on any of these shots over 4 lenses and 2 different cameras. Okay, nothing moved. Nothing. Stamps are a really good way to actually judge color saturation and resolving power because they're incredibly fine detailed, like paper money, and the color saturation on some of them is just incredible. Here I have the D750 on the right and the D500 on the left. The D500 I use the 35mm f2 D series autofocus. Same thing, f5.6 at 2.5 of a second. Not 2.5 seconds, but 2.5 of a second. Here you can see a serious difference. We have some some slight underexposure over here on the right, obviously so relative to the Nikon D500 on the left. I had a controlled light source in the other room where the light was peeking around. It was actually coming in from this direction. Here in a second I'll show you where they came out at basically the same exposure, but even adjusting the files around the Nikon D500, much cleaner, but that's because there's more resolving power on the shot due to the pixel density at 4.2 micrometers versus 5.9. The premise of this video is that yes, indeedy, folks, the Nikon D500 does stomp on the skull of the Nikon D750. As far as color saturation, autofocus acquisition, and low light rendition of a shot out of camera. None of these pictures were tweaked out of camera. None of them. Nothing was adjusted. Okay. Now let's take a look at some magnification on those two. Even raising it up over here on the right, which I did not do, another stop and a half, the Nikon D500 looks much better. Well, let's go on to ISO 6400. Another 50mm. This time we're at ISO 6400 instead of 12,800. Same 50mm f1.4D and same 35mm f2. And the same distance, plate number 2. A radical difference between the two. It's like, well, the shot on the right is nearly 2 stops under compared on the D500. The transmission on the two of these is nearly identical. The point is that the post sensor, SNR firmware and 80 converter for out of camera before it's buffered to the cards is far superior. Like, well, did you meter this at all? Yeah, I did. I wanted to keep the exposure. See, someone will always complain about something, but I'll show you. Let's get over that in a second. Here's a zoom. Okay, here we have nearly the same exposure. Here we're looking at a totally different set of lenses. Now I have the 85mm f1.8 D series autofocus on the Nikon D750, and for the rough the same captured field of view, we're talking about 90mm. Since it's a 60mm f2.8 D series autofocus 60, field of view on a DX crop's basically 90. So we got 90 here and 85 here. Not enough to make any significant difference at all. Oh my God, the difference. Color saturation. Just ignore the ultimate resolution difference, because there is more translational information of the image projected to the D500 sensor than there is on the D750 due to the pixel pitch, but it's just ignoring that. The color saturation and the image cleanliness is far superior on the Nikon D500 than it is on the D750. Here they are at magnification. Wow, what a difference. I'll have the links below on these shots. Now someone will say, well, why don't you use a dozen more lenses? I could easily do that. It doesn't matter what I do. Apparently, and I knew this would be the case, a lot of people, and I have a D750, that's what I'm filming on right now, will just complain. It's like, well, there's a camera I don't have. I mean, my camera's better just because it's not the camera that I have. It's like, well, that's understandable, but you know, the empirical reality is that the D500 is better. Well, it's a DX crop sensor. You're right. I've spoken about the advantages of full-frame cameras endlessly, and that's not going anywhere. Obviously so, because a 56mm, while it's an equivalent of an 85, for example, still doesn't have the same compression. And you know, the depth of field is different. To get the bokeh out of an 85mm f1.8, for example, you have to take a 56mm and drop it down to f1.4 and 1.2 to match the bokeh, or the bokeh, of the 85mm at f1.8. And that's the reason why the Fuji lens, for example, the 56mm, is a radically fast lens at f1.2, because to get the exact same bokeh of a full-frame 85mm at 1.8, you basically have to drop it down to f1.4. And I've done a video on that showing that that is the case. So that's the reason why these DX lenses, especially for portraiture, are so incredibly fast, is because you want to get the exact same depth of field effect, the same bokeh, the same bokeh. You got to open it up a lot more on the DX crop sensor lens. So full frame advantages are obviously known and certainly obvious. But this is 4 different lenses over 2 different cameras, and nothing was moved. The distance remained the same throughout all these shots. I'll have the links below. People wanted me to do this test, and they were complaining. They'll still complain after this video. There's always something for someone to complain about. It's like you give a mouse a cracker, he'll ask for some cheese. You give him the cheese, he'll want to know where the tea's at. And you give him the tea, he'll want to know where the the music is playing. It's always something. You can't make anybody happy. Point being is that yes, flat out of camera, obviously everything can and should be tweaked in Lightroom, but out of camera. See, I actually have nearly a stop of overexposure here. You can see on the far left where the light is actually coming from this room and around the corner. There's only one light source. I couldn't see anything when shooting these. Only one light source. I almost have a stop of overexposure on the D. And both of these sets of lenses have the nearly the same t-stop of transmissive power, nearly the same element count. Like I said, over 4 different lenses. They're both low element count D-series autofocus Nikkors with nearly identical t-stop transmissive powers on their light. But you can see the difference. Like, well, why didn't you raise the exposure on this to match this? And that's what people will bitch about in this video. It's like, I wanted to show you how much better the signal processing is on the light. Both of these registered. I think this was 3/4 of a stop under, and this was half a stop under when I took the shot. And I said I did no alteration in post. That's how much better it is. I mean, that's what I've been saying. You don't have to believe, believe whatever you want. Go out and borrow the camera and test it yourself. You get the same results. There's nothing manipulated here. This is straight out of camera. Same shutter speed. Same aperture. Yes, they're different set of lenses, but this is what people asked me to do. They wanted to see the exact same distance. Well, actually, a lot of people wanted me to change the the distance. So, well, you want to use the same lens, we'll alter the distance, but you can't do that. Inverse square of the distance and the luminal intensity would change, and therefore the test would be flawed. I could stick the same 35mm on the D750 that's on the Nikon D500 and change the position, but that's going to change the intensity of the light that's hitting the sensor over a given period of time. So that doesn't work, baby. You need to keep the exact same distance. So anyway, make of it as you will. Hate it, love it, whatever. The links below are for these shots that I took. And thanks for watching. Okay, bye.